Awesome. Welcome to our live stream tonight. We're focusing on I Am Naloxone. I'm Mickey with Main Access Points.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen with Main Access Points.
And our tip of the month this month was about I Am Naloxone. So we figured we'd do a live stream kind of focusing on it, going over the history a little bit, and then going over some facts, myths, and benefits of naloxone. Um, so uh, so we're going to put some slides up on the screen real quick, and then Kristen can kind of go over what naloxone, what it is.
Sure. So we wanted to do this training, like Mickey had mentioned, just to make sure that we get the right information out about IM naloxone or intramuscular naloxone, and also because we have heard some folks share some hesitancy around using it. Some of the myths that we'll talk about tonight, people have actually really shared with us and talked to us about them. So I think it's really important just to make sure that we get the long history of IM naloxone that's been around for a really long time, and the benefits of it. And we hear a lot of folks, asking for a nasal Narcan, but it's really helpful to have a full understanding of how naloxone works and the different preparations of it. So we're excited that you all are here. And I love this cursive handwriting, Mickey. This is great on the slide.
Yeah, I love
Canva. So I think, I'm not sure if it's the next slide that goes into sort of how naloxone works. So thank you. So we know it's an opioid antagonist. We have these little receptors, these cute little receptors, as you can see here in our brain. When an overdose is occurring and there is really potent and too much fentanyl going over those receptors for them to process safely, they'll stop sending the message to my lungs within seconds to minutes. And so when Narcan is administered, whether nasally through the mucosal membrane or like we're talking about tonight, intramuscularly through the muscles, so the side of the arm, the side of the thigh, or the butt, and we'll get into that a little bit more on too. It's going to go into the bloodstream, take about a minute or two, go up into those receptors, kick the fentanyl off, and bind there instead. So as this little graphic says, naloxone just has a stronger affinity to the opioid receptors than the opioid. So the Narcan, the receptors are kind of like, get out of here, fentanyl. For 20 to 40 minutes, we like the Narcan better. The Narcan binds there, and then the receptors can start sending the message to my lungs to breathe again. The other thing that's really great to know is that it's completely safe to use if somebody doesn't have any opioids in their system. It's like spraying water up their nose or injecting them with water. It's not going to make any situation worse or cause any additional harm. So that's really great to know. And sometimes other respiratory depressants like benzodiazepines or alcohol can sort of mirror some of the symptoms that we see with respiratory distress. So that's just an important point to know too when we're talking about safety around naloxone. And yes, if anyone has any questions while we're going in the chat, I know I'm still getting used to Restream, but if anyone has any, we'll be checking the chat too, and we'll try to answer anything that anybody has.
Yep.
So I think we're going to move on to the next slide, right, Mick?
Yep. Something that I just want to add about the receptors too is that sometimes the opiates last longer than the naloxone. So that's why it's really important to stay with somebody and keep an eye on them, because the naloxone will last about 30 to 40 minutes. But when it starts to wear off, if the opiate is lasting longer than that, they can go back into, an overdose. So
yeah, for sure. Especially if maybe they've been mixing it up and they have other stuff in their bloodstream too, or if it's a stronger analog of fentanyl they're not used to, their body's not used to. Once it sort of, the Narcan wears off and it rebinds, they definitely could go back in to an overdose. So we should definitely keep an eye on everybody and take care of them. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah, not a problem. So now we're just going to go over a little bit of the history around naloxone in general. And Kristen, if you have anything to add, definitely interrupt me or whatnot. This is just some stuff that I've looked up, but I know Kristen's been doing harm reduction quite a bit longer than I have. So in 1961, which isn't on the slide, is when naloxone was first patented, and it was patented by Moses Lewenstein, Jack Fishman, and the company Sankyo. It was finally FDA approved in the USA in 1971, and it was FDA approved to be administered intravenously, subcutaneously, which is right under the skin, or intramuscularly. So in the early 90s, what was happening is you had harm reductionists out there helping to, reduce the harms associated with IV drug use, especially with AIDS going through in people who inject drugs. It was skyrocketing amongst them. So you had harm reduction programs that were focusing on that. And in 1992, specifically, the Chicago Recovery Alliance was co-founded by Dan Biggs and John Seiler. I think that's how his last name's pronounced. And so in 1992, they co-founded the Chicago Recovery Alliance, and it was focused on harm reduction around people who inject drugs. Well, in 1996, one of the co-founders, John Seiler, ended up passing away from an overdose. And so at that point, Dan Biggs and the rest of the Chicago Recovery Alliance, they decided to expand the mission to also covering getting take-home naloxone out to people that are actually going to benefit from it. In about 1996 as well, there was an article that was published in the UK that was talking about the benefits of take-home naloxone. So, and this is just from some research that I had done, so I'm not sure if that's possibly where the Chicago Recovery Alliance had gotten the idea from, but I know there was multiple points in 1995, 1996 area that they that it started to be thought of for at-home emergency use rather than just being used in the hospital setting. And so in 1999 and 2001, take-home naloxone programs emerged in San Francisco at the San Francisco Needle Exchange and in New Mexico. And then in 2002, there was an article in that same journal, BMJ, a column by Dan Biggs that released some of the numbers. And in that article, he had said that there had been 52 reported overdoses that had been successful, and all 52 had been successfully reversed with naloxone. And at that point, just the Chicago Recovery Alliance had also distributed over 550 kits of naloxone to different community members. And then, so between, it was between, I think, 1999 and 1996 and 2010, I had found that over 200 programs had started distributing naloxone across 15 states. So, and then in 2015 is actually when nasal naloxone became available. So all the way from 1996, when it started to be given for take-home naloxone from programs like the Chicago Recovery Alliance, all the way up until 2015, it was IM naloxone that was being given, not nasal. So I was actually surprised to find out when I was looking that up that nasal is so new, because a lot of people, like, when I know you've seen this, Kristen, like when you mention IM naloxone to people, they usually feel more comfortable with the nasal. And I just thought it was kind of cool that nasal has been around for so much longer.
Definitely. Yeah.
So now, as of 2016, as you can see on the slide, 30 states, including Maine, had made naloxone available to family and friends without a prescription. So as of August of last year, all 50 states had some form of a naloxone access law. They vary greatly from what type of access. But I know, Kristen, you know a little bit more about what what Maine's law is.
I know a little bit. So Yeah, I guess if I can roll us back just to 1996 for a second
Yeah.
too, I just wanted to add, and I know lots of folks on our team have this history too, just around um, when we talk about how harm reduction has had to distribute IM naloxone and naloxone into the communities of people who need it most. Originally it was a struggle to get access to get it. They needed doctors' approval. And so a lot of times in the early days, they did go to Europe to try to get some of it to bring back to the United States to begin this mission of including take-home naloxone before the doctors would sign off on it. We also lost Dan Big a few years ago now. And he really championed naloxone distribution to people who use drugs and their loved ones in our country. And, used to carry a duffel bag around to different states full of naloxone to bring sort of like a Santa, a Narcan Santa, to places that didn't have access. And I remember very clearly doing needle exchange work and doing harm reduction work in the early 2000s here in Maine, where we didn't, it was very rare that we had access to even IM. So just the realities of, how it looks very different in different states. And then having the honor of doing some harm reduction work in San Francisco and the West Coast and seeing that was where I was first introduced to intramuscular and the long history of people who use drugs that have had it there forever and were really the experts in saving each other's lives. So that just kind of struck me. And if we were talking about it last night, Mickey, but if there is anyone really interested in the history more, learning about naloxone, I'm reading this book called OD right now. And I can't remember the author, of course, because this is when I should remember the author's name, but we can put it in the chat and get the information out. But there's a lot of good history about the history of actually the medication itself too, which I found really interesting, learning about how it sort of was developed within the hospitals. There were some DEA dogs that were involved in, at first being used on them after they were doing drug searches. And so knowing the history that it's been around a long time and that, unfortunately, it took so long to get into the hands of the people who needed it most. And we lost so many people along the way before that happened. So as far as Maine, I'm definitely probably the newest one to Maine on the team. So I'm a little nervous about sharing this, but there are standing orders within different states. So different doctors will create an entire standing order for different states. Here in Maine, we have, our program has specific prescriptions they're sort of like standing orders from two particular doctors for people to have this take-home naloxone without a prescription so that we're able to dispense it safely to anyone. So what it really means is that we don't need to have a doctor dispensing it, right? Community members, volunteers, harm reductionists, people that are within the community, are a wonderful community distributor team. They can be the ones to train people and really from a community perspective, be able to get it to the folks that need it most. And thank you, Anna, thank you for our host who's doing TA tonight about the book. That's great. So 2015, it seems like a while ago, but it wasn't really that long ago. So you're totally right that it's still really new. And a lot of that is people not knowing what existed before the nasal, I think, and not really being able to kind of wrap their head around a different version of naloxone. So yeah. And we're going to go into why it works. It works a little faster and all of those benefits too in a bit too.
So I just have a quick question about the book, because I had read in a little bit of my research that that when naloxone was first FDA approved, one of the uses was actually to diagnose illicit drug dependence. Does it mention anything about that in that OD, naloxone, and the politics of overdose?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
I won't tell the surprises, but yes, I won't tell the surprises, but yeah, that was one of the most interesting parts because it got sort of redirected. But yeah, I won't ruin the surprise, but read the book. Yes. And I'm going to share it with you too. Yeah.
No, definitely sounds like an awesome book. I know I want to read it. So that's just a little bit of the history. I'd like to be able to, at some point do a whole training on just the history of harm reduction and the history of naloxone today would definitely take up more than just this hour of the stream of the live stream. So, but yeah, so I don't know, Chris, I want to go over, a little bit of the, let me see what's next. Here's real quick.
Our trifold.
Oh yeah. So yeah. If you want, we can take the slides down. If you want to go over a little bit of the like actually how to use I am Naloxone.
Sure. So currently, right now, with main access points, we distribute a lot of intramuscular Narcan to folks who use and inject drugs, who have to loved ones, to people in social networks and peers who are worried about somebody they have directly in their life that might be at risk of a fentanyl-based overdose. And so with the intramuscular, we give, I'm just looking for a bag that I, of course, don't have near me right now when I need it, that we give people. And it's a long sort of amber bag that is hard to see through. So it's pretty private that people would know what's in it. Although I think most folks, when they see that bag, know that there is it is the intramuscular Narcan. But included in it, we give 2 doses of these little vials. So there's 0.4 milligrams of naloxone. It is liquid based. So you can see, this is just water in my trainer, but you can sort of see through the window there on the back of the vial, it moving around, and that's the water. And this is the way it comes. So we give two doses of this in each kit. And then we give 2 of the 25 steroid needles, which, thank you, Gina. Gina is saying that she has some of the bags for the Narcan, which is super helpful. I will grab one when I finish and I'll show y'all. And then this is the steroid needle. So it's important to note that these are not injection needles. People are not injecting drugs with these. They might be, skin popping or muscling using these like a steroid needle. But sometimes there's a lot of confusion around how you actually administer Narcan. So as Mickey said, we are muscling this. It's kind of like a vaccination. It's just like a vaccination shot when we're administering it. So it needs to be pretty long to get in there, right? If we had a short little pin, it'd be a little bit trickier to make sure that we're getting in there and being able to give the whole dose. So, and it also makes it safer for us actually in administering it when we're kind of being able to use it sort of like a dart. And I'll show you that in a moment too. So when we're going to administer it, again, this will come up later, but a lot of times when people are using their substances together, they'll have this preloaded before, and that's a really great thing. I don't know why I'm holding up the needle like that, but that's a really great thing to talk about with folks around a safety plan before you're using substances together. So if there's a risk that you think that there, might be a new supply, that something seems weird with the supply, maybe you haven't used in a while, 3 to 5 days is all it really takes for your tolerance to change. So moving back in to using a substance, could be riskier than it was before when you were using it on a more regular basis. So with that said, having a safety plan and talking together with people that you're going to use together with is really important. So everybody knowing where the Narcan is, potentially having it preloaded so that if something does happen, knock on wood, right, you have it there with you so that you don't have to take the seconds to minutes to load it up in the moment when we really could be using that to get it into somebody's bloodstream to get it working. The other thing that Mickey always mentions too is never use alone. So that's a really great hotline staffed by harm reduction volunteers, and they will stay on the phone with you while you're using your substances. They have your information, and if anything happens and you become nonverbal or not responsive to them, they can send out emergency resources to the address that you've given, and then everything sort of goes back to the point one and is erased around that information each time you call, which is really great to know it's confidential. And so that's a way for people to feel like they have a peer or somebody there with them if they don't actually have a person there to be sort of supervising each other. We also know that people who use drugs, when we talk about supervised injection sites and supervised consumption sites, they've really been supervising one another and keeping each other safe forever. So that's important to note too. Okay, so now I'll get to how to use the IM and start jibber jabbering. So This is the one dose. When we're ready to use it, we're going to take that orange lid off there. And since this is my trainer, it's a little dodgy. It comes off it by itself, but we're going to take that off. And then you can see there's sort of a corkboardy part. I call it a corkboardy because it's kind of where you're going to put the bevel of the needle in, the tip of the needle in, and it's kind of bouncy. And so when we're ready to do it, we're going to take that cap off the syringe. We want to be aware, right? We've now taken the cap off. We want to watch where we put the cap. So we're going to put it sort of right near us because we're going to need it again to recap it after we use it. Again, thinking about it when we're administering it. So when we go to load it, we're just going to take the top of the bevel and put it right into that corkboardy part to begin to draw it up. So we want to make sure that usually we tell folks have this window part where the liquid is facing you so that you can see what you're doing. For the sake of the training or showing you all right now, I'm going to have it facing you guys so you can see. So we don't want to put the needle like all the way up to the top, right? Because then if we start to draw down, we're just totally going to miss everything, right? Because we're in there and we're the bevel or the opening of the syringe. If you're not familiar using syringes, we're just going to be getting air. So really we want to pull the bevel of the syringe. You can see it moving in there. I'm trying to find the light here, right above the silver lid. So that's right above there. And Jean is asking if we need to do an alcohol swab. We don't really need to do an alcohol swab. These these syringes can go through clothing as well. And we're not injecting, right? So we're just doing, if we had time and it was a different situation and not someone going into respiratory arrest, then definitely we want to be sterile and as clean and get all the bacteria off as we can. But we don't need to do that in an emergency response. But great question. So then when we go sort of over that silver part, I want to make sure my syringe is not weird because this is my trainer. Sorry, everyone. We're just going to have it right in that little opening part, right above the silver. This is really harder to do to show you all than in real life. Okay, and then we're just going to draw it up. So you can see some of the Narcan starting to come in or the water. Sorry, now I have shaky hands and I'm not even responding to an emergency, so you can tell. And then there is going to be a little bit of air, so you're just going to push back up a little or tip. You get the full amount that you can, and you don't need to worry if you don't get all of the liquid, right? So you can still see there's a little bit of liquid there. There's some in my barrel. And then I'm going to take the vial off and be ready to go. Again, we're super aware. We now have an open syringe, and also we don't want to hit the plunger before we actually muscle it or get it into the person. So we want to make sure, usually, the thigh is one of my favorite places to go. There's it's kind of juicy there. There's a lot of muscle. It seems like a good spot. You can also go here. I know for me, when I first did this, I was very tender and I was very nervous. And so I just kind of went in and hoped for the best. We do need to do this with some force, and we're not going to hurt the person. There's lots of muscles here. So we're just going to take it right, sort of like a dart, and then have our finger on that plunger there and go through the clothing. We can go through jeans, jackets, fishing pants, anything really, really thick like snow pants or something, probably not. We might want to take a layer off in the winter, but we're just going to jab in into that spot and then hit the plunger when we're in there. If you can, it looks like Gina's done some stuff in medical field. So if you are skilled to be able to plunge in like the dart and then hit the plunger at the same time, then we're going to get it into the muscle, right, and into the bloodstream, and we're going to start to get it working. When we're done doing that, we're taking it out, and now we have a syringe that has actually been in somebody too. So we just want to be aware, look for that cap. I'm pretty comfortable with syringes, so I can put it right back on. But you can have this on the ground or wherever you are on a surface and scoop it back in. So you're sort of reducing the risk that you're going to poke yourself once you've injected it into somebody. And then we're going to put this to the side. And if we have a co-responder, we're going to say, load another syringe for me while I do the rescue breathing, right? So that we know if we need some more Narcan, we'll be able to quickly have that ready for us in about 1 to 2 minutes while we're waiting for the Narcan to work and we're doing the rescue breathing. Sometimes we get questions, can we do both preparations? And I know tonight is all about IM, but it is important to know that you can use both. So if you only had one IM and one nasal or a different version of that, you can definitely use both. But we're going to follow the same track of administering it, breathing for the person, 2 rescue breaths and a breath every 5 seconds for about 1 to 2 minutes, nothing's changing, then we go ahead and give the second dose. And the reason that time is a little bit faster than we usually hear is just because of the potency of fentanyl. It's really, really strong. And so we want to make sure we give it the time to start working. But it's a little bit faster that we can administer the second dose. Giving people back-to-back intramuscular Narcan or nasal Narcan isn't going to rescue anyone or get them breathing faster. It's still a medication like we were talking about. You still need to give it some time to get up there to those receptors, kick the fentanyl off, bind there instead for 20 to 40 minutes. And then the rest of the fentanyl that doesn't disappear, as Mickey was saying, it just hangs out above. Some of it's breaking down into the bloodstream, hopefully. So when the Narcan does wear off, I'm at a manageable high. But there is that chance that we talked about that I might go back into an overdose, especially if I got other stuff that maybe my friends don't know about I took beforehand, or other things are mixed up in. Did I forget anything about how to use? Did I forget anything, Mick?
No, not that I can think of. Yeah, and like, yeah, the only thing that I can really think of is just that if you didn't wait that 1 to 2 minutes and you're giving more, is that you're taking the chance of like you said, it's not going to give any benefit doing it too quick, but you're also taking the chance of putting somebody into withdrawals worse if you're giving them more naloxone versus less.
Yeah.
And they're opiate dependent, but
yes.
But yeah, and it's also good not to try to make sure that the person doesn't try to use something, sneak off and try to use something within that 40 minutes as well, because they might wake up not feeling the greatest.
Yeah, definitely.
But
One
no,
other thing I was just thinking, I was thinking that I forgot, because everyone keeps asking me, and I'm looking at Gina's question. Oh yes, singing. You can sing live. That's beautiful. I'm not a great singer, so no one needs to hear that. But I usually do 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. But you can definitely sing Staying Alive when you're in between your rescue breaths. I've had a couple people with the preload ask like how long the Narcan would survive in the barrel. I think we have like about a week's time in reality. Somebody from our MAP team might know a little bit better, and I'm trying to get an answer for folks. But if we think about it being okay in the vial, right, it's the same sort of deal in the barrel. I actually personally think it might last longer, but we'll definitely for anyone listening who's asked me that question and I haven't got the direct answer for you, we'll still try to get it for you. But we know if you're using it within a period of time when you're together, it's going to be effective for at least a week or more. Well, thanks.
Yeah, and then Kristen also does a monthly overdose prevention and response training that is on Zoom. What day is that normally again? It's on a Thursday, correct? The third Thursday of the month, is it?
Yeah, we usually do a Thursday morning, and then we'll do like a Thursday afternoon during the month too, just in case people can't make it. So we do have one tomorrow at 4. So if you want sort of a more fuller training, you can definitely, there's a Zoom link that maybe our lovely host can put in, and they just put in our calendar so you can check it out. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, and Gina, I'll make sure, yeah, it looks like it's been put in. I was going to say I'll make sure that you get it, but awesome. So yeah, and we also do have some resources on the website as well. We have 2 brochures for overdose response on there. One that goes over using nasal, one that goes over using IM. And then, and Gina, I can send it to you in an email after the live stream, no problem. If you just want to message me on Facebook, your email, or I'll have Anna can take that down for us. But yeah, so we have those pamphlets. We also have the tip of the month that me and Kristen are going to be going over soon. We have that on the website. And we do, as Kristen mentioned, we do have the calendar up on the website now as well. So we're trying to make sure that all of our trainings and community events and stuff are up on that calendar. And that was just put up within the last couple of weeks. So definitely, if you want to know what's going on, check it out, mainaccesspoints.org. And so, yeah, now do you want to go over the like the myths, the facts, and the benefits?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
We need like some music or something, like game show music or something.
I know, the Jeopardy music.
TA, can you do that for us? Thanks. Cool. So should we start with the myths?
Sure. Do we want to go back and forth, or do we want to go like completely through the myths and then go back through the facts? I'd say probably.
Maybe we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I think Gina might have a question. Gina, we can't hear, so do you want to, can you type it in and then? Also, if you can't, that's okay too. We can get you later. Well, maybe we will get started, and then Gina, if you have a question, we'll make sure we keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool.
So
go ahead, Mick.
All right. Sorry, I just had to pull it up so I can actually read it. Right. So the first myth that we have is that IM naloxone is dangerous to use because of the steroid syringe, and it's harder to use because you have to inject someone with it. And I know you touched on this a little bit before, but
yeah. So I guess the fact, right, is that we're not injecting it. So that's really important. It's also important because a lot of times, and I know maybe this is older, but I hope we don't hear it as much anymore, but that, giving out intramuscular Narcan, that there'll be syringes discarded, more syringes discarded in the communities and things. And, we know that there's really not a lot of research proven to prove that, even with needle exchanges. So that's something else that we won't get into tonight, but that's important. And that we're just muscling. And now we're also used to vaccination shots, unfortunately. So, that's really what we're doing. If we need to explain to somebody kind of what we're doing with the syringe, and it's not, it's not any harder. And I think, like, to go back to the beautiful history that you showed us, it's really about honoring people who use drugs and inject drugs. And that's what they had to use to save one another. And folks that inject drugs and use syringes, just like folks that have diabetes and use syringes, are very familiar with syringes. And so it doesn't freak them out to use that as a tool to save somebody else. And I think we have to really kind of ask ourselves, are we comfortable with them, and what's that about, and what's the story behind why we have so many feelings about a syringe that we get our blood drawn from, that gives us vaccinations and healthy things, all of that stuff. So definitely not dangerous. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that fact, Mick.
No, I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, I mean, if you look at, well, and like the easier to use aspect of it, like, I think it's just as easy to use as nasal is. I mean, it's just as many steps.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I did just want to touch on the question that you did ask. So actually on our YouTube channel, there's trainings on wound care. There's trainings on harm reduction during COVID-19. Yeah, there's a bunch of training, know your rights training. There's quite a few of them on our YouTube training. Awesome. So, and then, so the next one that I have is that the myth would be that IM naloxone doesn't work as quickly or as effectively as nasal.
Oh, this one's your favorite. I know. So I feel like you should do the fact. You should do the myth and the fact. Do you want to do the fact too? Go ahead. I know you like this one.
So this is actually the exact opposite. So they actually did studies, and they found out that IM actually works on average quicker, is less likely to need a rescue dose than nasal, and is what's that use? Works quick. Oh yeah, and it like brings you out of the overdose on usually more gentle than the nasal does, which I think would be pretty good if you're, opiate dependent, and not only does it work quicker, but it's gonna give you less severe like withdrawal symptoms. So I thought that was really good. I actually just read too that they did a study on like how quick IM is versus IV, and they found out that once you figure in the time that it would take to set up to get an IV naloxone, that it's like almost the exact same amount of time between IV and IM. So I thought
Wow.
that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that is cool. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the things I know I've been learning a lot setting up this tip of the month.
Yeah, awesome. I did want to add, so now I'm just thinking about what we talked about those receptors. And I guess like probably most folks that are tuning in or watch this know, but I think it is important to mention like what we're talking about when we're talking about precipitated withdrawal, and then naloxone works and lifts somebody's medication, the fentanyl, off their receptors that they're used to having every day to function. So, precipitated withdrawal within 30 seconds, the flu on steroids, just really nasty, gnarly, wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy if you've not experienced it yourself in life. So when we're talking about like making sure that we're dosing the Narcan properly, breathing in between, like it is a medication. And as you just said, thinking about how we can more gently rescue someone and bring them back to breathing. All of those things are really, really, really important. Just to remember for folks that don't really know maybe what we mean by sort of withdrawal or what's on the other end of that. Yeah. I didn't mention that
Yeah,
before.
that's a good point. I also would think like that it would do less to the body too, like with bringing you out of the overdose, more gently, like that it would just be full on easier on the body altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know, like, I was thinking when you were talking about IV, I guess not to bring not to bring another preparation of Narcan into this conversation, but before, for those of us that don't remember, we had a multi-step before we had the nasal that you had to put together, and you could sort of titrate the mist, like give somebody a little bit of the mist, breathe for them, see if they needed more, give them a little bit more naloxone up the nose. When fentanyl came on the scene 7 or 8 years ago, we then needed a stronger dose. We needed less liquid, more concentrated for the nasal to get it working. And it was about giving them the whole dose because we needed that dose to get people breathing again. But there was a time where I've even heard experienced rescuers tell me that they would titrate the shot. So give somebody a little bit, and those were very skilled folks, giving somebody a little, breathe for them, see if they needed some more. And that was probably back in the day of heroin and other opioids. But, just to mention that history too, it's always really interesting how creative people that use drugs are street medics and figure out all of these things. And some of them have medical training, some of them do not, but, figure out ways to, save people like in a more gentle, kinder way, and make sure that they're giving them only what they need to come back. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable, like even back then, I don't know if I would have ever felt comfortable like being that skilled. I'm sure they were, especially being in like the bigger cities. Like, I mean, you said you did harm reduction out in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times that was with people's family or partners that they know were going to be real pissed when they woke up. And so like real pissed at them, at their family members. So a lot of that came from love of wanting to only give them the amount they needed to start breathing again. So
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just
I wouldn't want to put my worst enemy through withdrawals either. It's rough.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Hey, do we have some more myths? I think we do, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So you actually already kind of touched on this one a little bit, that intramuscular naloxone means more discarded syringes in the community.
Sorry.
That's a myth that we hear often.
Yeah. So I think I just had said like there's really no proof or research that dispensing the intramuscular causes more waste in the communities. And I think it's just another way to continue this, I call it needle nonsense, but this discrimination and against people who use drugs, against people who inject drugs, and syringes in general, and the values of their life and how important it is for them to have this in the community. So lots of times we hear that just about giving people new safe supplies so they can be safe and the people that they use with can be safe. We hear the same thing. So yeah, and I guess I don't know if it's important to mention this now, but Main Access Points does do community pickup, syringe pickup. So we, get a lot of our syringes that we give to folks, we get in return, people bring those syringes back to us for safe disposal, which is another piece of the history that sometimes people don't know about.
Yeah, and we also have under the resources tab on our website as well, if you're not close to one of our, where we would normally do pickups, we also have a how to dispose safely of sharps containers and how to make your own, because you can make them out of, used laundry detergent bottles, or I've even heard like the thicker milk jugs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found it really cool. Someone brought back a really cool thick milk jug and they drew eyes on it and it said old rigs. Sorry, but that was really cool. So people get creative with their sharps containers too. Yeah.
I know. And like you had mentioned, like, I think a lot of people, like, it really does come from the discrimination, because if you think about it, like, there are people that have diabetes that use sharps. I know, like, I've had family members that needed to have like blood thinners,
Yeah.
put subcutaneously, like, in their stomach to help with like blood clots and stuff, and we never like really question, whether they're responsible enough to get rid of their discarded needles safely or not. And like one thing that I had looked up as well is that like studies actually show that places that have SSP programs, like I wasn't able to find too much on IM Naloxone and the needles with that, but places that have syringe service programs are less likely to have needle litter because people have the resources to discard of their needles safely.
Yeah. Imagine that. Imagine that. Give people what they need and they will take care of each other. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
So let's go on to the next one. So another myth is that providers and healthcare workers prefer nasal naloxone over IM because it works better.
Yeah, this one's tricky for me. I think I was thinking about this yesterday. So we already covered it a little bit above, but nasal doesn't really work. There's no better or worse. Doesn't work better than IM. They both have their pros and cons, but I don't want to bring up like sort of the past. I don't know if folks have heard about some of the difficulties that we've had to sustain having accessible Narcan in the communities of people who use drugs and their loved ones, but that is a reality and always is kind of looming as a worry. And so, financially, IM is cheaper. It's a more sustainable way for us to make sure that folks can continue to have Narcan and have what they need in their communities and keep one another safe. And a lot of the overdoses that occur, we do get information back, but a lot of overdoses that occur, lives are being saved every day, excuse me, and 911's not being called. And a lot of that, most of that is often with IM naloxone in the community of people who use drugs. So yeah, I get curious when people say to me like, nasal is better. I want the nasal, because I just really want to know why and kind of break it down with folks. And that's why we did the training tonight too, to sort of talk about why both are really great options to help people stay safe.
And then, so I think the last myth that we have here is that people will be triggered by the needle because of, the needle that's involved with IM naloxone.
Yeah, this one's a hard one too. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, personally, I think like, it goes a lot back to what you had said about, you use what you have, and it's, about saving people, and the fact that it's not like you're, setting up to put it in intravenously. I mean, even that, if that's the only option you have to save someone's life, then that's the only option that you have. But like, the needle is not the same. It's a completely different gauge. It's a completely different way that you use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I often think, I've responded to a couple overdoses where people have fallen forward, and being able to administer the nasal Narcan we even had was impossible, right? They had fallen forward, they had crushed their nose. Nasal Narcan can also be sort of boofed or distributed, sprayed into the rectal cavity, into the mucosal membrane down there too, but that always isn't accessible or the easiest accessibility in responding. So, I know there's those situations where it was so helpful to have intramuscular to be able to use that, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to administer it at all to the person. And I often think, like, even some of our distributors, who I will never name and disclose their names, but even some of our distributors, have real concerns about IM, and talking them through it, sending them a trainer kit. I'll say, have you tried it when you're not in an emergency? Have you just practiced? Have you shown someone else how to use it? Sort of like what I did tonight, like getting familiar with it, holding the syringe, practicing loading up water. Anything is scary when we don't know it, right? And so this idea that, like, this is going to be like very harmful to people or scary to me. And then there are situations, definitely, and I have people I love in my life that have injected drugs and maybe have stopped injecting drugs at certain stages of their life, and have shared, drawing blood from them in their role in their jobs, or being around syringes can be hard for them. And that's okay too. So I think, like, talking through with people the real reason, and if it's because they're scared and they don't think they can do it, that's real. So we just need to help people feel more comfortable, and talk them through what it means, and how to use it. Because it can be like one of those things that it's like sitting in a kit and you're like looking at it, and you're like, I'm scared to use that. I don't want to take the needle out, because like then I'll think that something's going to happen. And then when you do need to use it, it's terrifying. So, hopefully you wouldn't have to, but I think just becoming familiar, like anything else, like an ambu bag, like an EpiPen, a defibrillator, any of these things that we have in our world that are medical, that are there for us to use for medical emergencies. We want to know how to use them before we jump in. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd say about that one. But we also honor people's feelings, right? So if someone really doesn't feel great about using it, we would never force anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Do you have, because I know, so the first time that I ever had to give somebody a shot, it wasn't even in the Narcan sense. It was actually giving someone Novalox, like, and I'm sure I'm not the only one this has ever happened to, but like, I remember the person that I was giving to was like, like you had said, like the dart, try to, make sure you get it in there. And me not wanting to hurt them, I'm like poking as like softly as I can. It would not go, like I actually had to get it to go through the skin. Do you have like any advice on, because like, I don't know if maybe like an orange or something would work, like something that would be about that same thickness so that somebody could get used to doing that if they had to?
Yeah, I don't know. Were you there? I don't know if you were there, but I think it was at a training yesterday, and we were talking about using a lemon or an orange, just to practice on. Yeah. And I think the poking, orange is great. I think don't do a banana. Banana would be weird and mushy, I think. But I think just getting the feel for it, and you're like, I know that you're not alone. I did the same thing where you feel like you're just poking to break the skin. But if you really think about, like, I got to get to the juicy bit, that muscle, I got to get it into that, right? That's why they call it muscling. So I think, And, if that happens, the same with if we hit the nasal Narcan before we get to the person, it's okay. Things happen when you're responding, but then we're just going to, take the syringe out. Really, we should get a new syringe. If we could change the point just from a sterile perspective, but if, you can't do that in the moment, we take it out, it's the same new syringe and the same person. And then we're just jabbing, right? If we haven't plunged it in there, we're jabbing a little harder and we're getting it in. So, sometimes things will happen like that, where you think you've got it in there and it's not happening. It's not getting into the skin because your hands are shaking. You think you're okay, and you look down and your hands are shaking, and there's all sorts of other stuff happening. So yeah. So let's practice on an orange. That would be great. We'll get some oranges.
Awesome. So now we've just got some benefits of IM. So I guess the first one is plan ahead. So unlike nasal, it's possible with IM to administer the naloxone and start rescue breathing at the same time. Also, the syringe, as Kristen mentioned before, the syringe can be preloaded. So before you, before you do your shot, and then, or however, you do it, and then it can be sitting beside you so that if something were to happen and somebody comes up, they don't even have to worry about the step of preloading, the needle with the naloxone or anything like that. It will be all set up so that they literally just have to pick it up and administer the shot. So now the one about being able to rescue breathe and administer the naloxone at the same time, I guess I'm just not really seeing how you'd be able to do that.
Oh, I think if you had two people, right? So if
Okay.
you and I were responding together, yeah. So it would be really hard to do it by yourself if you were just a solo responder. But if there were two people, because we have we're administering it in the arm or the thigh or the butt, right? We have the face that we can start breathing and start doing those rescue breaths too. So the other person could be giving them oxygen and then start it right away. And then the minute to two the Narcan takes to get in, we've already got some oxygen in their lungs. Because sometimes we find people, that maybe haven't had oxygen for a while. And so getting them those two rescue breaths, that's why we sort of train folks to say, if you don't know where your Narcan is, get them some rescue breaths. If somebody else is running to go get the Narcan, and then to always leave them in the recovery position. If you have to leave them on their own in case they vomit, to make sure their airways are clear. So yeah, I think that one, maybe we'll change the wording on that one and say co-responders to make it clear. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've seen some amazing rescuers. There could be somebody that could do this and be giving breath at the same time, but I don't know.
I'm sure there's somebody out there.
Yes,
But yeah,
definitely.
now it makes a lot more sense because even if you had two people, you wouldn't be able to do nasal and give rescue breaths at the same time.
Yeah.
So now I understand. And then so yeah, if you want to read the next one, and then I can read the third one.
Sure. Is the generally safe one or?
Sure.
Okay. So naloxone is generally safe medication. We know it's really safe. It's been around since in clinical settings since the 70s. And if someone is believed to be overdosing, even if you're not sure it's an opiate or fentanyl, you can still give them the naloxone. It'll not have any effect on someone that doesn't have any opioids in their system. A really good example I give sometimes is like if I had taken some Xanax that was not pressed with fentanyl and some alcohol, and it looked like, I wasn't responsive. It looked like I was going into respiratory distress. And, you could tell something was going on after giving me a sternum rub. You could give me the naloxone. It's not going to do anything, right? Because I don't have any opioids in my system. I could probably use some rescue breaths, but it's not going to make the situation worse for me. Now, if that Xanax I took had fentanyl pressed in it and you gave me the naloxone, then it's going to lift the opioids off, and I just didn't know it, then it's going to lift the fentanyl off those receptors for the 20 to 40 minutes and then get me breathing again. So either way, good and good, right, of being able to try to help out.
Yeah, definitely. And then the last one is just, always try to have a safety plan in place. It can be really hard when when responding and trying to, when someone's responding and trying to figure out what to do in the moment, it can be pretty hard. So just having a safety plan ahead, having your naloxone out where it can be seen, whether it's IM or nasal, so that, because obviously if you fall out, you're not going to be able to reverse the overdose on yourself. So it's going to be more beneficial if the naloxone's right out there in the open. And then I'm just trying to see.
Oh, the Brave app.
Oh, yep. And there is also, so the thing about Never Use Alone, about the hotline, is that you do have to agree that in the event an overdose happens, that the responder on the phone is going to call 911. They're going to call rescue services. Well, with the Brave app, you can set up your own like safety planning beforehand, but you can also set it up so that, say you have a neighbor close by that knows that you use, and it has, they have naloxone on them. You can put their information. I mean, I would get the person's, permission first and everything, but you can put their information in instead of having 911 called, and instead the Brave app would reach out to your neighbor instead of reaching out to 911. Now, the good thing, and I know Gina did mention it in the chat a little while ago about the Good Samaritan law, there will be some changes coming, and we'll have some training resources coming out on it soon about the expanded Good Samaritan law that will go into effect in August. But as of right now, even if, like, as the law currently stands, it's going to protect the person that calls and the person that's overdosing. So you are protected by the Good Samaritan law if you Never Use Alone and they were to call. That is going to be covered. And the operator on the Never Use Alone hotline, would be covered from any liability as well, because they're covered under the current Good Samaritan law. So yes, so it does cover right now, as long, if you call in good faith to get rescue services there because someone's overdosing, or if you are the person that's overdosing, you're supposed to be free from liability for arrest or prosecution related to possession, selling, or stealing drugs. Or no, trafficking is not covered in that one. So possession or stealing drugs are the two that's covered right now.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, the Brave app is so cool. Definitely. And I think the other thing sometimes we throw in is if you're definitely not someone that will call 911, if you find someone or someone close to you, and you don't feel safe to call, if there is someone, a neighbor that could call, or a bystander, and you can move into action still and get the person Narcan, give them some rescue breaths, leave them on their side, and then even leave the empty vials or the nasal, if you use nasal, near them, so that when EMS does arrive, you can kind of hang out maybe behind a Cumbies behind the house, make sure you hear the ambulance and make sure they're coming. But in those seconds to minutes of like planning, right, you've probably saved their life and you haven't had to be attached to calling 911 at all. So having, maybe if there is a safe neighbor that will call for you, if you can move the person out of your house and figure out a way to call, or if you just, find me on the bench and you're not sure what I took and you don't want to call the police and be involved with 911, you could still have someone else call, do the rescue process, and then probably save my life and not have to deal with all of that too. But those things don't really happen when we're in the moment. You don't think about all those things. So thinking about them ahead of time is really good. Like, what would I do? Okay, I could do this. I could have Mickey call. I could have, sometimes we hear like, I didn't want to call because my brother has warrants and he's in the house. We could have your brother leave the house, right? But if you don't think about it beforehand, it just becomes so crazy and scary that you just think, I can't call, he's going to get in trouble, right? So just trying to safety plan before is really great.
Yeah, that's a good point of why the safety planning is so much, is so important, because you really don't think about that in the moment.
Yeah, you can't. And our lovely host has reminded us that people who use drugs have been rescuing each other, with naloxone since the 90s, early 90s for sure. So definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say we're pretty much done for tonight. I would definitely put in another plug for Kristen's training tomorrow if you want to learn any more, go more in depth about overdose response and prevention. I know you go over like what the rescue position is and go over like nasal and all that in that training as well. So I would definitely, if anybody wants some more information, I would definitely sign up for or just come to one of those trainings. And Gina, as I said, I will definitely send you the link after we get off of here.
Cool. And please spread the word about IM Naloxone. Now that you know, we need more folks to spread that education about its benefits and why it's important that we keep it in the community. So yeah, now we're passing it on to you. So spread the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that the myths, facts, and benefits that we went over as well is also available in printable format right on our website. So you can print that out and share it as well if you'd like. But yeah, thanks for coming.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.